Okay, this is the Agilon webinar on dashboard reporting. And what I'm going to cover is basically the capabilities of the Agilon built-in dashboards and some various examples. And I'm going to spend some time on a bit of technical detail, which any of you who don't work directly with the database are free to ignore. But I wanted to provide various references to the vast amounts of information in Agilon's database that are very useful for any type of reporting, particularly dashboards. So a lot of the examples I'll show will be associated with some technical detail for that reference and will be available for you to use. We'll make the recording available afterwards and can also make the slides available to anybody who would like to get a copy. So dashboard reporting, the purpose and goal of that is to really let your users self-service their own frequent reporting needs. A dashboard report is typically something you're going to want to see daily, weekly, more often than once a year, more likely, or track daily advance towards goals or progress this year, those types of things. Our dashboards are all built off of selection wizard queries, and those of you who work with data will be familiar with that. So just like Crystal reports or Excel reports, you set up selection wizard queries and configure them into dashboard reports. And that's what we'll talk about today. When dashboard reports are available, you can authorize them to your various users through OneSecurity, and they can then add them and remove them from their personal dashboards as needed, and they can also configure runtime parameters, so different types of filterings on dashboards elements based on how you've set them up and what parameters you provide to them to use. There's actually two different user dashboard reports, one on the home page, and then there's a separate page that operates the same way, but is actually a separate display, giving you a separate dashboard report. And I'll show you examples of those also. So on the home page of one, if security has enabled, you'll see a homepage dashboard area. That area is collapsible and can be hidden or opened. That's what the indicators here are. And in this particular example, there are nothing on the dashboard to display. You can click the item on top here to go to the configuration area, and that's where you're going to see the different options available to add to your dashboard. This is an example of what it would look like if it were populated, and you can see there's a various assortment of graph types, tables combined with graphs, and so forth that gives you lots of flexibility depending on the type of information you're conveying. Navigation to the dashboard, a couple areas for that. We just looked at the home page. The dashboard report itself is under the reports menu, and again, this is enabled by security, so the administrator has to provide this to the user. And I also encourage people to use the user menu. Very simple to add your dashboard report page to the user menu, organize it into a particular category. In this case, we put it under My Reports, and you can, with the click of a button, go right to that. The reports themselves operate the same way, whether on the home page or under the Reports module. The only difference is you can have different items displaying and different setups on each one as your personal dashboards. They are drag and drop, so the widgets themselves can be moved around and organized. They can include graphs, tables, and you can also provide parameters that let them configure the different widgets. This is an example of the setup. Clicking the setup brings you to the library of available dashboard widgets. These again are provided via security, so some people may see all of them, some people may see only a subset depending on what the administrator has configured and allowed you to access. Adding a widget to your dashboard is as simple as clicking a button, and it will appear at the bottom of the current set on your dashboard. Each element on the dashboard has a configuration button. Clicking that will open the configuration menu. The dashboard will come with its name predefined from the library. You can change that to make it more descriptive for your own purpose. And if it has parameters the user can configure, you will see those here. In this case, we have 3 different drop-downs for choosing categories to compare. In this case, our alumni, our corporations, and our friends giving are aligned in comparison over the past 4 years. I'll walk through a little bit of how it gets set up. It's easy to do, and there's lots of options, so anybody who is involved in configuring dashboards for the users, I encourage you to just go in and try different things and see what they do. But I'll do a quick walkthrough and explain the various options. You configure the dashboard widgets under Reports, Administer Reports, Dashboard Widgets, in which case you'll see the available ones that are in the system either by default or that have been already configured by your administrators. You can search by names, descriptions, who created them, who has access granted, and also by the category here under Dashboard Report. All the report widgets are connected to a selection wizard query. And that is, in essence, what pulls the data from the database when the dashboard is displayed. Those of you familiar with Selection Wizard, this will look familiar to you. If not, I'm not going to train on Selection Wizard today. It's a fairly advanced topic, but all you need to know in terms of running Selection Wizard for a dashboard is the output is actually a report widget, and that will connect it to a dashboard. And when you run the Selection Wizard query, the columns and the rows that come out are how the graph or the table are actually built. The left-hand column are going to be the items graphed, and the right-hand column are going to be the individual elements of that graph item. So here we're comparing by fiscal year, gifts against pledges. So your query gets set up basically to feed a table to the graph itself. And that table has to be configured in the format and the rows and columns that you want to present on the graph. Connecting it to a report widget will make it available to the report setup, and that's all you really need to know in terms of the Selection Wizard. This is the setup of the actual report widget. It has a name and it has a description. That's what comes up in the library for the users to select from. It has various controls of its presentation. The top one here is how wide will it be. Depending on the screen size, you can get up to 3 or 4 columns wide. Generally, we design widgets to be 1 or 2 columns wide, but if the screen's wider, you can fit a 2 column next to a 1 column or 3 columns next to each other. It will adjust accordingly. But the overall width of this particular graph is going to be set here. And then the graph itself and or a table that's included can have its own width set. So here the graph is set to 2 columns while the table is set to 1. You can adjust those as needed. The table can appear next to the graph if it's a 2 column wide widget with each of the graph and table being 1 column, or you can have one above the other depending on these settings. The Selection Wizard query is done through a lookup with a magnifying glass, and once attached becomes the driver of the data for the widget. The checkboxes on Show Graph and Show Table turn those on or off. So if you wanted a table only, you would turn off the graph. If you wanted a graph only, you'd turn off the table. When they're both checked, you'll see both. And then each you can see has a configuration. Besides the width, you can show it as a stacked graph in that the different fiscal years in this case would be one on top of another. You can also make it 3-dimensional, which is a visibility viewing kind of thing, makes it look kind of modern and pretty. And depending on the kind of data, the amount of data, the size of the data, the range of the data, you can decide how big that presentation should be in terms of the height. The column width determines the width, the height determines the height. So they don't have to be the same, it doesn't have to be square. The graph type, there's a number of selections here, and in the presentation I don't have an example to show you, but area charts, pie charts, bar charts, line charts, all the various normal graphing you might do in Excel are available here. Table height is set in rows of data versus pixels. Pixels is actually the screen sizing height of the graph itself. The link URL is available to provide a drill down on items in a table. And it will provide a drill down to, for instance, an event or something like that, but it has to be configured with appropriate parameters so that one knows what that link goes to in terms of the item you're trying to drill down to. This is further down on the configuration page. We were just looking at graph setup and table setup. From the selection wizard query you attach, one scans the setup for the selection and pulls out the available column names and gives those to you in terms of rows and columns that are going to be displayed. If you want to hide any particular one, you can simply uncheck it. You can also set a format to the data that that column contains. So here our category, which was the fiscal years, or the friends and alumni and corporation, that type of thing, the categories of data, we will have simply as text to display that label. However, the gifts columns for each of the fiscal years we're comparing, we will format as currency. There's also numeric formatting in here for non-currency and some other options. The total column is used for tables, and if you check that, it will insert a total row at the bottom of the table showing the total for that column. In this case, we're showing totals for all 4 years we're comparing. The link here corresponds with the link URL. If you've provided the link URL and you turn that on, it will link that column piece of data as the parameter to be used in that link. And again, that has to correspond to something that makes sense. So it's a little bit technical, and I'm not going to go into examples of that particularly. But it does give you some capability for drill down. The order is then the column's ordering of how they're going to be presented. So in this case, 2007 will be on the right and 2010 will be on the left. The parameter setup again comes from the selection wizard query, and these are runtime prompts that are done in selection wizard, and those of you familiar with reporting will know what the runtime prompts are. But the widget picks those up, the runtime prompts, and gives you the ability to set default values. So when the user first pulls over the widget to their dashboard, these are the values that will be shown, in this case, in the category comparison. So I'm going to walk through some examples, and this then ties back to some very powerful areas within the one database to use for reporting in general and particularly for dashboards. Giving summaries, appeals, tables, gift club calculations, campaign calculations are all summary data that's contained in one that is very easy to pull out and very easy to graph and show in these types of reports. So I'm going to give you some examples along with what those look like. The giving summary page, of course, keeps track of prior year's giving, lifetime giving, matching giving, totals. Also keeps track of numbers of years, total years as donor, continuous years as donor. And this data is fine to look at for a particular individual, but it can easily be aggregated into total gifts this fiscal year across individuals or across categories of individuals. And that's exactly what we do in the example I showed earlier. Another powerful thing from this data is your libunts and sibunts. Very easy to determine who gave this year, who has not given this year but gave last year and who has given some year but not this year. And those are coming off the foundation total year counters. Will show if you've given this year or not. And then the totals of contributions for this year and prior years are all held in the table. So these are all in the MSTR table, and this is some of the technical things I was mentioning. If you don't work with the data, feel free to ignore the technical part and simply realize what can be done. This is the actual selection wizard query. You can see it's not overly complicated. We're simply summing up these totals across categories of individuals. The individual categories are runtime prompts. And as we saw in the setup, our category becomes the labels for the columns, and then the gift totals become the comparison columns. Selection wizard output is a corresponding table. I like to show that because you can see how that really just renders directly into the dashboard widget. In this case, we were totaling on the gift columns, and that's where the totals row came from. So the runtime prompting in Selection Wizard is a particular setup, and we show that here for the 3 different categories we're selecting. And those immediately translate into the runtime prompt selections that the user has in configuring their graph. It's another example of donor metrics. Using that same basic data, we can look at new donors this year and repeat donors. We could also pull reactivated donors very similarly. Would be a good example in this same data set. Here's an example using that same data, little different calculations for alumni participation rate. And here we're limiting the category to the alumni category, but using essentially that same giving data. Very quick, very easy to do. If you want to look at particular contributions in tracking development or campaign-related efforts, you can easily track gifts and pledges and plan gifts to particular fund or categories of funds or funds associated with a college. The account number, the gift amount, and the gift date are all held in the various tables. Gifts, pledges, and planned gifts, or wills, is why that table is named will. A fairly simple query with a runtime for a given fund account, in this case the Alumni Association Fund, and totaling of the gifts across there. Selection Wizard output gives you a simple table, and that table is reflected in the widget along with the graphed results. Some things to consider with dashboards, particularly on the home page. When you log in and open that dashboard, it will run the queries and pull the data in real time. So you want to have your dashboard queries be fairly efficient. That's why the summary data is wonderful for that. You would not want to really run through 500 gift records trying to total them up. Going through the summary totals is much, much quicker. And when the dashboard opens on the home page, it will slow down the opening if you have extensive queries running there. So we always try to design our queries to run very quickly in those contexts. Another approach you can take to speeding up any kind of reporting, and dashboards are particularly important since they're real time, and that is create a summary table with the particular information you're looking for. And in this case, we took and summarized gift and pledges to a particular account, and now in order to pull the Alumni Association account, I have a single record to look at instead of adding up everybody that might have contributed to that. We have several summary tables like this in one, in addition to what I'll show you for handling contribution totals and householding and things like that, and be happy to give any advice to your report writers in using those tables if you're not familiar with them. So I'm going to show you other built-in product type things that are available that you may or may not have seen in any work you've done with reports. Hopefully you'll learn some new information here, but I'll also show how these things, this data can easily be brought up into dashboards for your fundraisers, your alumni relations people, and your marketing communications people. In this case, we're going to look at development, and we're going to look at particular data around prospects. 3 tables involved: the actual prospect records themselves, the development managers, DOs, and open proposals. In this case, we're going to start looking at pipeline of asks in our major gift development. The particular fields in those tables are highlighted here. Again, for the people who work with reports, I wanted to provide that as a reference. Selection wizard query, again, a fairly simple query. And in this case, we're using fiscal year calendar type prompting. And if you're not familiar with that in Selection Wizard, again, that's a different type of training I'm not going to go into. But what you need to know is you can actually set date parameters to move dynamically. You can do things like pull gifts in the last month, in the last fiscal year, in the last quarter, next quarter, things like that, and you don't have to have physical dates. It simply rolls with the current calendar date. And that's what we've done here. So we're looking here in terms of open proposals by stage and doing a count, and what we're looking at is this fiscal year. So that's why the year date prompting is done. We don't ever have to go change those. We'll always look at the current fiscal year here. Another example with prospect management and development. Again, the prospect table, the manager table, and here we're going to look at individual major gifts. So we've pulled out our top donors, the amounts given, and the reference to the name. This could easily be filtered for prospects who are assigned to myself as a development, to a constituency as a development group, or any other number of filters. We could look at the major donations by alumni versus corporations, etc., all off that same type of data. Another example with activity in development. Here we're going to marry our prospects, our managers, along with contact activity and plan activity. With contacts and plans, we have a solicitation level that was done at, the type it is, a contact or plan, and the contact type, email, phone, site visit, things like that, and the manager associated and the date associated. So with that data, a little bit more complicated. We've abbreviated the query here. There's several joins to be brought in. But again, we're looking at fiscal year, and we're looking at a particular manager that we're filtering by as a runtime. And here I've got my year-to-date contacts by month. You could do a comparison of contacts against goals, things like that. Gifts against goals can also be done in this same context. Moving on to appeals tracking. If those of you who are familiar with appeals will know that there's quite a bit of data accumulated. We manage appeals for gifts, pledges, and plans gifts. We can also associate appeals with events, campaign initiatives, membership campaigns, online giving, lots and lots of different ways to essentially categorize how our funding is coming in. This is the appeals browse in one, basically here to show the different layers. You can group by the type of appeal it is, and then break those down perhaps by fiscal year, and then within there the different solicitations, and accumulation is done as a roll-up. So at any level you can look at that, and that data is all available as summary data, so it's very easy to query and report on. Appeals are wonderful for phone-a-thons, direct mail, campaign priority tracking, events results, all the ROI types of things we look at. Here's an example of an appeal roll-up. Breaks out by the type of donation that was received. If it's a pledge, what's remaining outstanding and the totals for that. So your contribution information broke down and summarized, as are your statistics, the average gift size, the number of solicitations extended via email, mail, otherwise, phoning could be, the numbers of gifts and percentages, all of those broken down. So these are all in the campaign table. So all the appeals summaries are held there. There's a number of amounts fields that are totaled up for each appeal and a number of counts fields. So these are easy to pull in your query and provide in various graphs and tables. Here's an example coded to a particular appeal and extension. Selection Wizard pulls the 3 fiscal years of the appeal codes we're trying to compare and the totals of the gifts and pledges for those. So you can see easily this could be an annual fund type of appeal or any other priority. And of course you can combine appeals if that makes sense. This is a particular individual appeal and type of solicitation. The Gifts Clubs module is a very, very powerful tool. People sometimes think of gift clubs as recognition only, that we're looking for donors who have given at a certain level in a certain time frame in order to recognize them. But really what's happening in the Gifts Club module is it's calculating contribution totals based on rules that you define. And so you can set up a gift club to calculate most any kind of total you're looking for given a number of attributes that you want to include or exclude from those totals. You can see here in terms of the contributions, do you want to include gifts and pledge balances or just gifts? Do you want to include paid matching and unpaid matching? Those are all options. You can also factor the matchings by a percentage. You can run the gift club calculations over a certain date range. So it could be just this fiscal year, it could be last fiscal year, it could be total lifetime. And the same with the planned gift commitments. You can include the gifts themselves, open balances, and so forth. And you can even bring in soft credits, related credits from spousal giving, so you can household here in these totals. And you can bring in non-household but related contributions, again, creating totals broader than the individual themselves. This is what shows in the Gift Clubs module. You can see the amounts at given levels, or the amounts that qualify them to a given level, and you can set up rules that qualify a gift. In this case, we have a rule set up that the gift has to be to a particular fund, and it has to be an amount greater than, in this case, $10,000 to qualify, and it has to be from an individual. These rules are very flexible, so again, you can filter the contribution calculations as needed and create literally hundreds of these totaling algorithms to keep track of things you want to report on. With that, the data is summarized into the club membership table. So the level and the contribution totals that have been calculated. You always want to look for current giving. You always want to look for an active club, and that is one that's keeping track of totals currently. They can be turned off, if you will, or be past done and not be current. So I highlight that here. And again, the technical query information and what comes out of there, each level, totals and gifts and pledges. And then here is an area chart showing increases in pledges and gifts. However, our top level has really fallen off this fiscal year for some reason. Can alert us to investigating what's going on there. Another example, here we're going to pull a count of people in each level versus the dollars given. And here again, we notice our drop off of people giving at the platinum level, which corresponds also to the dollars we saw drop off. The campaign module is another wonderful reporting tool, keeping track of all kinds of breakouts of contributions and goals for your different capital campaign elements. In this case, we're tracking different colleges, different priorities on campus, and we can break down the contributions into how we want them to be bucketed, restricted, unrestricted, student support, etc. And we can break out the types of contributions, planned gifts versus open pledges versus outrights, and so forth. The module itself has segmentation of areas and districts, categories and groups and category codes. So you can slice and dice these totals in many different formats, and all of that is available via reporting also. So here you can see, given the criteria we've sliced our capital campaign contributions by and the breakout of the types of gifts, the totals that we have. There's also recognition totals, which can include essentially the recognized for the gift, even though the gift didn't come from the particular entity, or you can have actual totals. They're both tracked. Another wonderful summary area of the campaign module is the gift chart, and this is essentially your giving pyramid and sets up totals against projected totals against actual totals. So here you have goals, and you can easily map progress towards goals, both in dollars and in numbers of participants. Here's where the projections get set up. So the number of prospects, the number of actual donors, and the total amount for this particular area of the campaign and gift chart is configured, and we can use that in our reporting. The participant commitment table are where these totals are tracked. So it's broken out by the types of contribution tracking you've put into the campaign. Here we're looking at contingent pledges, irrevocable plan gifts, outright gifts, open pledges, and revocable plan gifts are the totals we're keeping. The query, the output by those breakdowns, and in this case, we show a pie chart showing how those gifts are coming in. I mentioned income versus recognition. The query can be qualified for either, and you can take a look at both. Move on to alumni membership. If you're using the membership system, you will easily be able to track statistics around your different groups and clubs that you have available. A little bit more complex query. Again, notice we're using the calendar calculations, so we don't have to set particular dates. We are looking at particular groups and clubs here. You could qualify your query accordingly, but this one looks at a particular gift and club. And what we can look at here are counts of people this current fiscal year versus last fiscal year in active memberships. Another memberships query, we're looking at dollars. No, excuse me, we're looking at new memberships by month. So this is again a counts query, but we're breaking it out by the month, and we get that by essentially the date of membership. Here we're going to look at dollars revenue for the memberships. Again, this comes out of the membership table, and the dues amounts and the expiration dates, the statuses, and the group and club that they belong to, all summarized. Here's the query, and here's essentially our different clubs and the totals by month of expected revenue. If it were historic dates, it'd be past revenue. Another example, dues by month when they're received. Move off to constituent connection and your online activities. Everybody wants to know what's happening with online giving, return on investment for various appeals, driving people online, those sorts of things. That's all tracked outside of even the normal gift processing, or in addition to the normal gift processing, in the constituent connection gift and pledge tables. So you can easily isolate what's coming in from constituent connection. Again, the designation or the fund account, the amount, and the dates are all there to report on. Here we're looking at pledges versus gifts, this fiscal year versus last fiscal year, and a very simple query to do that using the date calculations, so we don't ever have to update those. It'll always be current. Number of other tables online that are useful for activities primarily. You can track user activity, you can track activity in a particular area like class notes, business cards, so forth and so on. Here, for example, are breakout of business card postings, class note postings, new registrations, logins, how many people have come in and used, how many people have updated profiles, how many people have given gifts, how many people have given pledges. Very simple query to do. And tie that in then with e-marketing. So the relay campaign results, again, summarized in a nice table in EDS campaign within one, and the actual email itself, the solicitation or the communication name, how many were sent, how many were opened, subscribes, unsubscribes, etc. are all tracked in that campaign table in summary totals. Very easy to pull and report. So here, for example, we can take a look at relay campaigns. You could limit it by dates to this fiscal year, last month, however you would choose to do your date. But here you can look at statistics and even do percentage calculations, which is what we're doing here, so that we can factor that into an easily to understand number. Another email marketing example. Take the email campaign, combine it with the recipient's information, and we can take a look at upcoming campaigns of what hasn't been sent yet but is prepared to be sent. So if we want to keep track of our planning and calendaring for emails, if you will, we can see how many people it's going to and the date and time it's set to go. We could look at past email campaigns the same way. And looking at events. Events tables keep total calculations for responses, attendance, etc. So here we've got a list of our current events, the date they're set to go, the number of people that have responded that they're coming, and we also brought in the payment totals. We can set goals for each event, so we can see current payments against the goal, and we can also set sponsorship goals and see where we're at for that. So that's a quick run through of a broad range of data within one. It can easily be extended out via summary tables that your organization does themselves or other summary tables that Agilon provides, and we're always developing and extending out these kinds of capabilities. So we're welcome to get feedback from you if, as you're doing these types of dashboards and other reports, if you're finding it difficult to get certain types of data, that's what we work on and make better and easier for you. So please do give us feedback in this area. I hope you're all using dashboards in some context. I know a number of organizations use an outside reporting tool, and that's fine. This same data applies to that, so hopefully make your life easier there. And the one dashboards are also very nice for your users because they're integrated and immediately available. So definitely a good tool to have available, and I hope you find it useful. And that's all we've got to cover today. Were there any questions or comments from the audience? And it's a quiet group. My pleasure to talk to you all today, and hope to see you at user group this spring. Mark your calendars and catch our upcoming webinars in the next few months. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.